Well, good afternoon and welcome to Let's Talk Live, a Wednesday edition of our church service where we have some announcements and we also have a short devotional at the end. And whether you're eating lunch right now and watching us live, or if you're coming later this evening and joining us during dinner time, we are just so happy and appreciative that you would take your time during your day to join us. So we have a couple of things. First of all, you may notice that I am not Pastor Eric Rook, and for those of you that are not necessarily familiar with our church, I am the Children and Youth Director, Kevin Nixon, as it flashed up there on the screen for you. And for this week, Pastor Eric is taking a well-deserved vacation, and he has called me in to pinch hit. And yes, that is a joke play on the fact that I am wearing my Mariners shirt this week, and that the first announcement that I have for you is that baseball, at tomorrow, I believe, is opening day. So after all this time during COVID, we finally are getting sports back, and then a week from tomorrow, we are getting the best sports league that has ever existed, which is the NBA. Feel free to debate that with me at church or online or wherever you want to contact me from. But now to more like church news, not just general news. I'm just going to talk, that's going to be my only national news is sports, because that's really what I love. So here at the church, if you need a mask, we happen to be offering free masks. So if you need them, we can help. You can complete your request form at www.stillwellumc.org, and you can connect to arrange for delivery or pickup, and we have adult and youth sizes available if you need them. We have a new manna food packing event in El Dorado, Kansas, Wednesday, July 29th. There are 2 shifts available. You have them at 4:30 and 6 o'clock p.m. If you want more information on that, it is available on our website at the Connect page. And then the last 2 things we have for you is we got Kids Connection, which is tonight, Wednesday, 5:30, and we're going to be going over what we've been watching, which is Veggie Tales, and we'll be learning Veggie Tales' take on the story of David and Bathsheba. If you're wondering how they do that or are curious, you can look it up. It is an incredible tale. It's about Larry the Cucumber and a rubber ducky. So that is all the announcements that we have for today. But that kind of brings me into what I'm going to be doing later in the week, which is I'm going to be preaching on Sunday. And on Sunday, we're going to be talking about what I'm talking about today, which is the story of David, right? So I'm going to dive in here real quick. So I've got a story about the Israelites and the Philistines. Now, the Israelites and the Philistines, to use another sports metaphor, were like the Red Sox and the Yankees. They were natural rivals during that time. And here in this time, at this point, the Israelites were out of Egypt. They'd come out of the Promised Land, or come into the Promised Land after being exiled for 40 years, and they were under the reign of King Saul at the time. And so Saul had overheard that the Philistines were going to try and come up and take over their land. And you see, at that time, the Israelites were located in a mountain area, and the Philistines were located in somewhere called the Central Plains, all right? And in between them was this place called the Shephelah. And if I mispronounce that, Eric, feel free to text me and give me a lot of grief about it. But I believe it's pronounced Shephelah. And that is the in-between space. As you can see, we have a map up there kind of the layout during that time. And so the Philistines were going to go ahead and try and take over the land of the Israelites. And so King Saul moved his armies into the position in the mountains, and they were kind of at a standstill for many months. You see, either army to come down meant that they had to go down a hill and that they were going to be vulnerable. So basically, they were at a standstill. No one wanted to take their armies down the hill and to become vulnerable. They all kind of wanted to wait until the first person were going to make a move. Well, the Philistines made the first move, and if you've seen any great kind of olden time kind of movies, whether it's like 300 or Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings or just a lot of those kind of movies, there's this thing called single combat. And single combat is where you send one foot soldier down, and you basically say, let's settle it with this one-on-one battle, and we're going to just settle it on the field between one person versus this other person, a mano a mano. And so the Philistines send down this giant, this 6'9" soldier dressed up in armor, and he had a sword and a helmet, and he sent him down there. And I think we all kind of know where the story's going. This giant's name was Goliath, and David, a shepherd boy at the time, was going up into the mountains, and he met with Saul and said, guess what? I know all of your other soldiers are afraid to come down from this mountain and face Goliath, but I'll do it. And Saul's like, are you nuts? Like, what's going on? There's no way you can do that. And so the story goes, Saul tries to give him his armor, but David says, no, I don't want the armor. David goes down, looks for a slingshot, finds his 3 stones, puts up the slingshot, hits Goliath square in the forehead. Goliath falls down, and then the morbid part where David kind of comes out, cuts off Goliath's head, wins the battle, and it's a victory for the Israelites. Or so you're told, right? We're told that David was the underdog, that David was supposed to be the odds-on underdog, right? It's the classic story that's made it into the literature and the words that we use today, right? With sports opening back up, whether you're going to watch baseball or basketball or you're waiting all the way for football, we have this classic word that's been thrown at us for a long time called a David and Goliath story, being that David is the underdog and Goliath is the heavy favorite. I remember it was a few years ago where I learned that that was not true. So the reason being is, so you have a couple of different kinds of soldiers, right? Goliath, as I said earlier, is a foot soldier. And we have David, who is a slinger, right? So David had this thing called a slingshot. And slingshots, it's not the traditional, pull it back, Dennis the Menace kind of slingshot where you're just firing at your friends. No, this is a weapon. And if you look up here, it has all the different pieces and, there we go, the pieces and parts to it right up here. And basically, instead of going like this, you are putting a round stone. And in Israel, they have rocks that aren't quite like ours. They are heavier rocks. I mean, these are like baseball-sized rocks. And you would put it into the pouch right there. And you would sling it back. And you'd sling it as far and as fast as you could. And then you'd release one of the strings, and it would shoot out, and you would, hit your target. And this isn't just, it hits and it hurts like a pellet gun or anything like that. No, this is out to kill or really hurt someone. This, if you were to be hit by this, it would be like being hit by, imagine, I don't know any Royals baseball pitchers, but I do know Mariners, and there's a pitcher by the name of Felix Hernandez, the greatest pitcher of all time. And imagine and was a Cy Young winner, so imagine a Major League Baseball pitcher lined up, and you just, instead of in the batter's box you had a bat, you're just sitting there, and you told him to just hit me square in the forehead as fast as you can. Just imagine taking a 99-mile-per-hour fastball right in the forehead. That's what David was trained to do as a slinger. In fact, slingers in war during that time were some of the most useful assets during war because they could strike people down from a distance, and they could do it well. In fact, there's some studies that show that they were able to hit birds out of the sky, and they could hit objects from 200 yards away. So David was approaching this person called Goliath, and then Goliath, as we know, is a giant, right? And most scholars think maybe 6'9", some people estimate a little higher than that even. And a lot of people speculate that Goliath had this thing called acromegaly, all right? So that is, if you ever have heard of it, there's this character called Andre the Giant who is a wrestler, and if you don't know him as a wrestler, then you need to watch the movie The Princess Bride. He's this huge, giant guy, and he lived till about 46, and he had acromegaly. His body continued to grow and ache. He never really stopped, and it was something that eventually took his life later. And a lot of people speculate that Goliath as well had this. And we have some biblical evidence as well, with some people saying, they led Goliath down. Why would someone need to be led down, right? We all can kind of walk on our own. They said that he walked slowly. He needed to be interpreted. Those kinds of things like that kind of led us to mean, Goliath needed to have hand-to-hand combat to even stand a chance. But David was standing 20 yards. Goliath was expecting a wrestling match. Goliath was bringing a knife to a gunfight, if you've ever heard of that term before. So David, from the very beginning, was the favorite. There was no doubt about it. David walked in and was the heads-on favorite. Goliath couldn't even reach. Every weapon he had was meant for close combat. So what does this mean for us today? Well, Goliath has been a representation of fear for a long time, right? People feared just the idea of a giant. It's why they hid up in the mountains. No one even thought outside of the box. I'm sure there were other slingers sitting up in that mountain, and none of them walked down because they saw something that they were afraid of. Pastor Eric's talked about this idea of fear, and he's repeated that the fear is real. And during these times, maybe it's COVID, maybe it's the social injustice that's going on in this world, the political unrest, or maybe it's more personal for you. Maybe you have stuff going on in your marriage or with your children or whatever you have going on in your life right now that breeds fear. Maybe it's something that you've done that you don't want to talk about or are afraid to give the light of day. I believe that God calls us, like David, to come down from the mountain, right? To face our fear. It's very hard, especially during these times, to come down from the mountain and face things that we've done or things that we don't like or things that make us feel uncomfortable. But, it's during these times that we rely on God and family and friends to pull us down from the mountain. Communities around us that support us, things like that, we are called to go down. And you know what? You might just find, just like David, everyone else thought he was the underdog in that situation. No one else was going down. But David knew he had the steadfast advantage. And when you face fear with God, with your community, with your family, with your friends, you just might find that you have the advantage too. Let me close this in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you so much for just the opportunity to talk, whether it's over video or in person, and just praise who you are, Lord. And hopefully, through church and community, we can look more and more like you. As we go on through this week, allow us to battle fear with you and with our communities and with our family and with our friends. We love you, Lord, and in Jesus' name, amen. Please join me this Sunday. We'll be continuing to talk about David and Israel's thirst for a king. But until then, I'll see you guys later.